place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins, Makeshift Stories presents a monthly journey into the improbable.
This month's story, 156, Zoe's Constellation, read by Mitchell Tew. Somewhere and sometime, a clear, starry night will be priceless. Zoe watched the lights of the new town dance across the dark ice at the mouth of the Churchill River. Ochre lanterns drifted up at random, carried into the night sky on the fleeting heat of small candles captured in brown wax paper bags. The tiny orbs rode the gentle late evening currents as the thump of rhythmic bass guitars and drums chased laughter across the river's mouth. It was New Year's Eve, and for the moment, the ravages of the recent past lay hidden in the darkness, so everyone could, for a few hours, pretend the last half-century had never happened. Zoe watched, engrossed in the moment, ignoring the drag of the past and the pull of the future. She stood on a low bluff seaward of the old launch site nestled safely above the rising waters on a prominence jutting aggressively into the Arctic Ocean. And for an instant, the world was filled with potential. Zoe watched the paper lanterns drift up, then begin to fade. Once they had all evaporated into memory, the chill of winter began to bite through her clothes. She turned and headed back along a narrow, twisting trail. The dull smudge, which these days served as a full moon, did little to illuminate her path, so Zoe tripped on a root and found herself on the frozen ground, the cloth of her wind pants torn over her left knee, the flesh beneath stinging before the pain hit her brain. She rolled onto her back for a moment to catch her breath and look up at the gray soup of the starless night. "Be patient," she whispered to the sky, then laid back on the ground, waiting for the pain to subside. Zoe felt something trickle down her leg, wiped her knee with one hand to confirm she had cut herself on a sharp root or rock, then cursed for not bringing a headlamp. But she didn't have time to lament her stupidity. She needed to get back to the small private launch site where the rocket, her fleet of tiny CubeSats were cradled in, waited to return to the heavens what had made the ancients wonder about the universe at night. "What happened to you?" Noah, Zoe's longtime artistic collaborator and friend, looked concerned and angry. Noah was usually the calm one in the partnership. He had been the patience she lacked in the years of negotiation and planning leading up to the moment. "It's just an hour to the launch window. Why were you gone so long?" "We were worried, and rightly so. Look at that cut on your knee. You should have at least taken a flashlight," Noah complained. Zoe knew he was right, but stubbornly refused to admit it. "I'm okay, and the New Year's lanterns were amazing to see. I didn't believe it when Emily told me about the tradition. It seemed so out of place here, on the edge of the Arctic Ocean, but they were beautiful, like sparks from a bonfire drifting in the wind. They gave me a sense of hope and wonder, and made me even more determined to see my project through." Noah glared at her. "Our project," he corrected. "You could have fallen into the ocean. It's not completely frozen, so you would have died of hypothermia." Noah scolded, rising from his chair in front of the launch console to retrieve a faded-looking canvas first aid kit from the wall near the door. "I know you love stuff like that, but tonight? Really? Let me dress that cut. And if you had fallen over the edge when you tripped?" "You would have launched anyway. That's what we agreed. The launch goes no matter what." "How?" Noah complained as he ripped open a sterile gauze and doused it in peroxide. "This might hurt. You better sit down." Zoe slumped into the closest chair and tensed in anticipation. "You haven't told anyone the coordinates of the window, so how could we launch?" Even though this had been a long-standing sore point, Noah was angrier than Zoe had initially realized. "Those numbers are the gold, Noah. They're the reason the Lux Foundation supported us. Sorry they need to remain with me until I enter them into the guidance system just before the launch," she explained for what felt like the 1,000th time. "And if you had died out there just now?" Come on, you know about the dead man switch. They're locked in an online data warehouse, and if I fail to log in hourly, they get posted to a public website. Everyone would have access to them. So, you could have launched as soon as they were released. I doubt anyone else could exploit the data before you. Who else would have a rocket fueled and waiting on a pad? They had been through this argument many times over the last few weeks, and Zoe was getting tired of it. Why had Noah suddenly become fixated on the coordinates? And as the launch drew closer, for some reason she didn't understand, she felt she was losing her connection to him. The dead man switch was what they had agreed on when she first told him about her discovery of the hole in the orbital debris field and her idea for a globe-spanning artwork to reignite the world's imagination and provide hope for the future. Back then, he had understood why the location of the window needed to remain a secret. Noah finished applying a bandage over the cut on Zoe's knee and was putting the first aid kit away when Emily, the owner of the private launch facility, burst through the control room door, almost tripping over Noah. I could hear you down the hall. Were you two arguing again about the coordinates? Emily chided, and she noticed Zoe's bandaged knee. Zoe, I told you to take a headlamp. Not enough moonlight gets through the Kessler cloud. You need to be more careful. And Noah, you know we would have launched without Zoe. Now we've got less than an hour. Let's pull it together and make this happen. Initially, Zoe hadn't been sure about Emily. The unassuming 50-something woman had inherited her father's defunct business, which before the Great Cascade had launched micro-CubeSats into near-Earth orbit. Some claimed that it was one of those thousands of little machines Alouette Orbital had launched, cruising at 28,000 kilometers per hour, which had triggered the first collision. Such an eventuality had been theorized in the 1970s by a NASA scientist named Donald J. Kessler, and for which the impenetrable cloud of junk, which now blocked access to space and obscured the stars at night, was named. Zoe had found Emily in the footnotes of an obscure Wikipedia page while looking for a way to get her project into orbit. Who would have thought such a remote northern town would have had a history of rocketry dating back to the middle of the previous century? It had taken a while for Emily, who now owned the worthless launch complex, to admit the defunct company still had a small stock of useless leftover boosters. Emily had been cautious at first, but eventually warmed to Zoe and was now her biggest supporter. She had used most of her remaining inheritance to secretly reopen the facility and refurbish one rocket. So, are we going to do this? Emily snapped impatiently, then stepped past the two stubborn artists to check the rocket status screen and scowled. Noah, haven't you been monitoring the fueling? Tank 2 is overpressurized. You should have called me. Her fingers danced across the keyboard until she was satisfied. Then Emily turned to confront Zoe and Noah. You're the ones who came to me, remember? I'm committed now, and you two better still be. I've invested too much to have your squabbling sidetrack us now. And besides, it's a great idea, Zoe, to bring wonderment back to the world, to let everyone see what the night sky used to be like. Even if it's just laser light reflecting off the debris of our past excesses which forms Ursa Major and Minor and Polaris, the hope it will instill is desperately needed. We need to be able to see beyond our limited horizons again and gaze into the night sky and let our imaginations run loose. We need the creative spirit to take root again. That's what your artwork will offer the world, Zoe. It's grown beyond you and your petty differences. Emily pointed an accusing finger at Zoe and Noah. So, you two need to put your differences aside for now and focus, if we're going to pull this off. Argue later if you still want to, that's your prerogative. Zoe looked embarrassed. You're right, Emily, and that's why the location of the hole in the cloud will be a secret until it's loaded into the flight computers a few minutes before launch. Noah glowered at her, then went over to his seat at the console and dropped down onto it hard enough to ensure both women knew that he was still angry. Zoe's phone buzzed in her pocket. Surprised, she pulled it out and looked at the number. It's from the Lux Foundation. I better take this, she said, then stepped out into the hall. Yes, this is Zoe. Everything is going well at our end. We'll launch on time at midnight. Are your communications people ready?
There's an unexpected wrinkle.
The woman on the other end of the connection apologized.
This shouldn't affect anything, but I want you to know you are going to have an audience for the launch. The funder is on his way to you. Should be there in a few minutes. He wanted to witness the launch in person.
How did he find out? Zoe demanded indignantly. I've never told you where we're launching from. Have you been tracking me?
No, of course not.
The woman insisted.
Look, Zoe, we don't know how he found out. He doesn't have your contact information, so he asked us to relay this message to you. He has been pressuring us to find out where you were, even threatened to pull our funding, but we refused to help him.
Thanks for the heads up. I better go. Zoe abruptly thumbed the call off. She was mad and could feel the blood begin to pound through her heart as she rushed back into the control room. What's the matter? Emily asked with concern, noting Zoe's expression, which was a mix of panic and rage. It's the funder. He's found out where we are. He'll be here in a few minutes. Emily looked confused. I thought the Lux Foundation didn't know who he was or where we are. I thought so too, Zoe confirmed. Okay. Emily took a deep breath. Those are the cards we've been dealt, I guess. But does it matter at this point? We're so close to launching. More than you can imagine, Zoe yelled, then kicked the waste bin near the door in frustration. We can't let them in here, she insisted. It's okay, Zoe. Calm down. This is private land, so no one can enter without my permission. But how did he find out? There's only less than 30 former launch sites across the globe. Maybe they just guessed and got lucky, Emily rationalized. Or someone told them, Zoe accused suspiciously. Outside, the sound of approaching helicopters cut the argument short. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at its screen, then thumbed in a response to a text. There's 2 helicopters, she confirmed. One's landing in the parking lot, the other's hovering over the rocket. I told the launch staff not to let anyone off of the one that's down. We'll delay them, and I doubt the other helicopter can hold station over the pad for the next 45 minutes. There's no place to refuel around here. Noah, keep an eye on the rocket status. I better go help my staff. Emily threw on the Alouette orbital parka Zoe had been wearing and left. Zoe began to pace and curse. How did they find out? Noah, who would have told them? Noah swiveled in his seat so he was facing Zoe and folded his arms across his chest. I did, he admitted in a calculated tone. Zoe stopped in mid-step and rounded on her collaborator and friend. That's not funny, Noah. It wasn't meant as a joke, I told them. Unable to speak, Zoe turned red with rage. I know you met with Azul Corp. Noah continued. You kept that from us, didn't you? No, Zoe choked out, ready to explode into a fury of swear words. She held back and managed to calm herself enough to get out. You've never understood. I understand much more than you ever gave me credit for. Noah spat back. You can deny it to everyone else, but I know you've been in contact with Liam Ross, our not-so-anonymous benefactor. Maybe this time you should have looked the gift horse in the mouth. Hey, I found out about your meeting. Were you ever going to tell us? Huh? Maybe after our artwork gave you the career boost you've been lusting after all these years? Does that sum it up? Zoe looked like an angry wolf about to pounce on a member of the pack who had just gone rogue. She had known Noah since they had met at college 20 years ago. And yes, her career had been more successful than Noah's, but they shared a deep-rooted vision of art's ability to transform the world in a positive way. So, they had collaborated on numerous projects. She had been the creative thought leader of the duo, but Noah had been the one who transformed ideas into actions. Up to now, Zoe assumed Noah had been happy and fulfilled by their work. He was frequently sought out by other artists, needing help to make their ideas come to life, and often worked outside their partnership. "No, you've got this wrong, Noah." Zoe spoke in a tight voice, taking care to moderate her response. The project was too important and too close to completion for her team to start falling apart. She only needed to hold it together for just another 40 minutes. She was determined not to let this new revelation become another last-minute roadblock. "This project has never been about you or me, Noah. It's about giving hope back to the world. We both believe how important that is." "Yeah, maybe at first, but not now. This has become about your ego. Why else would you turn down an offer to sell that billionaire Liam Ross the coordinates? Yes, don't look so surprised. I know the details of the offer. Even if you'd kept the lion's share of it, there would have been enough money to pay back Emily and for everyone else who's worked on this project to live out their lives in comfort. I want more this time than a footnote in the small print for my contribution." Zoe's hands unconsciously balled into fists as she cycled through her emotions, staring at Noah in disbelief. "But we agreed the project was the best way to exploit the window. How'd you find out?" Noah cut her off, completing her sentence. "Those couple of days you went AWOL 6 weeks ago? Remember you refused to say where you were going? I was concerned and broke into your email." "But," Zoe began to protest indignantly. "I know you well enough to guess your passwords," Noah admitted. "I saw the email from Azul Corporation, the invitation to meet Liam Ross about a lucrative offer. At first, I couldn't believe that you'd even consider it. It goes against everything we've worked for. Then I got mad. Why should you get all the benefit again? Why should you make the call for everyone who's put their life into this project for the past 5 years? What about Emily? She's burnt through her inheritance for this project. It's not yours alone anymore. We all have a stake in this. We should all decide. I've been struggling, telling myself that there is still a larger good that will come from this. But when you decided to go on your little jaunt tonight and left Emily and I to do all the work, that was the final straw. I contacted Azul and told them where we are." A tense silence fell over the room. Finally, Zoe managed to unknot the muscles in her face long enough to speak in a quiet but barely controlled tone. "Unlike you, Emily still believes in the project's goals. I had no choice, Noah. Ross was going to defund us unless I met with him. I was playing for time. That's why I didn't tell anyone. I was doing what was best for the project and the world. But now you've gone and done this. You've brought him here and jeopardized the whole project because of your selfish insecurity." "And whose name was going to headline the project? Whose?" "Zoe's Constellation. That's how it would have been referred to. Yes, you found the hole in the debris field, and yes, it was initially your idea. But it was the rest of us who volunteered our time because we believed it was the right thing to do, not for fame or money. We made it real, not you." There was a beep on the console behind Noah, which interrupted his rant.
15 minutes.
A computer voice assistant mechanically announced. Rushed footsteps and excited muffled voices approached the tiny control room from the hall outside. The door burst open, and 3 large private security guards stormed in, followed by a small but determined gray-haired man, dressed in expensive Arctic survival gear, which had obviously never been used before. Zoe and Noah stopped arguing and turned to face the intruders. "Please relax. Mr. Eggertson here kindly invited us." The man nodded toward Noah. "It appears your friend and colleague did not inform you that I was coming, so I asked the Foundation to let you know. If you have not heard from them, I apologize for the unexpected intrusion. I intended to be here earlier, but we had some trouble arranging transportation to such a remote location on short notice. Let me introduce myself. I am Liam Ross, founder and CEO of Azul Company. You may be aware of my little global enterprise?" He smirked. "We supply 80% of the world's potable water." "Where's Emily?" Zoe demanded. Ross's smirk grew. Apparently, Miss Cote hadn't paid the taxes for quite some time, and no one up here knew how to contact her. So according to local municipal bylaws, she has forfeited her right to this site. I arranged to cover what was in arrears, as well as provide funding for the new recreation center in town. Generously, the council has very quickly granted me use of this abandoned facility. In effect, Miss Cote is a squatter, so I had to ask her to leave immediately. You can't do that! Zoe almost screamed. Emily still owns the infrastructure. That's debatable, but not the land under it, and Miss Cote is more than welcome to take me to court to regain access. But until then, I have every right to be here. One of the security guards' radios beeped. The muscular woman put her hand to one ear, nodded, then caught Liam's attention. Sir, she tried to whisper, but the room was so small everyone could hear. It's the other helicopter's pilot. He's concerned about his fuel. Tell him to land. We've got things under control here, Liam stated, then waved the guard away. 15 minutes to midnight, Miss Gagnon. There's still some time to save me a lot of trouble and needless effort, so I'm willing to deal. Your friend Mr. Egertson here told me about the dead man switch. We should be able to intercept traffic to and from the website where the coordinates will be posted. A kind of man-in-the-middle attack, I'm told. We'll get the coordinates, then alter them and send them on their way. The world will be pointed to an admittedly thin but still impassable area of the Kessler Cloud. Everyone will think you're wrong, except for me, of course. I'll have the real location. Zoe initially looked crushed and deflated into an empty chair, then mustered her resolve. The rocket's still going to launch automatically at midnight. It will make it to the window before you can use the coordinates and render the area useless. She said defiantly, hoping Liam hadn't told Ross when the navigation data would be uploaded to the onboard computer. But her hopes were quickly dashed. Maybe it will, but who will input the coordinates? In good faith, I can't grant you access to any of the consoles in here until Miss Cote and I work out ownership. After all, I can't have you accidentally damaging anything. You should follow your friend's example. Ross nodded toward Noah again. Noah saw the light and cut his own deal for a rather handsome sum, or a seat on my expedition. The final choice is his, but I'd recommend taking the seat, Noah. The only requirement was for him to help ensure the rocket out there doesn't launch. Miss Gagnon, it should be obvious to everyone that the Earth is wearing out, and it's time to move on. So, I've been planning this for the last 30 years. Before the cascade of collisions shattered every human-made object in Earth orbit into tiny but deadly shards and blocked safe access to space for the next 500 years, I was invested heavily in the sector. None of this is public, of course. My goal was to set up a colony on Mars. We had secretly sent enough assets to Mars on robotic missions to build a permanent colony. All that was needed was people. But then the event occurred. We had 2 ships completed, each capable of carrying 100 colonists. More than enough room for my family, other wealthy friends who helped to finance the project, and the scientists, doctors, engineers, even artists needed for a healthy reboot of humanity. I had hoped you would have joined us as one of our expedition artists, Miss Gagnon, but you have turned me down. Your friend can now have that seat if he wants it. Noah, if you come, you'll be the artistic leader of a new world, and never overshadowed by the likes of Miss Gagnon again. Liam gave Zoe a quick, insincere smile. All we have to do is wait another 7 minutes for Miss Gagnon's dead man switch to trigger. But I'm a fair person. Miss Gagnon, if you voluntarily give up the coordinates, I'll ensure the Lux Foundation will support all your future work. You could even stop the launch of that rocket out there and reschedule it until after our departure. If the debris around the window has not been disturbed too much, you might yet be able to position your sats in what's left to create your artwork. It's not a bad idea. In fact, I've always thought it quite smart, like all your work. But those CubeSats will block the hole for more important uses, such as leaving this dying world. 6 minutes. The console voice assistant announced. There's still time to salvage something out of this, Miss Gagnon. Liam persisted. What, and help the wealthy abandon ship? Like I told you before, never. You need to stay with the rest of us and pay your part for the mess we've created. Zoe challenged, her fiery obstinance coming back to life. She checked the time on the computer, watching it count down until the display showed T-minus 5 minutes, then smiled triumphantly. I didn't tell Noah everything. What do you mean? Noah demanded, but his voice cracked with sudden uncertainty. You assumed the dead man switch would go off on the hour. True enough. But there's a second data store which just released the coordinates onto a different site. Mr. Ross, you'll be in a race now to see who can exploit that information first. What began as a distant low rumble soon grew to shake the entire control room as the rocket on the nearby pad sprang to life and leapt into the night sky. I think you just lost, Zoe laughed. Oh, Emily, thank you. I don't know how she did it, but it looks like you'll be staying home with the rest of us, Mr. Ross. The night had turned extremely cold when the north wind picked up. But Zoe and Emily had prepared for it, taking winter sleeping bags to cocoon in as they lay on their backs gazing into the night sky, watching it come alive. First, Taurus, Ursa Major, Canis Major, and Orion blinked to life as the lasers from the fleet of microsats refracted off space debris. Then, the transformation spread to the rest of the night sky, which began to twinkle with familiar ancient patterns. As soon as they evicted me from the property, I headed for the control room we had built off-site, Emily explained. It was initially used to test some of the early, less predictable boosters. My father didn't want to take chances with people's lives, so it was simply closed up after the testing was completed, and I was afraid it might have been flooded by the rising sea and almost was. Another year or two and it would have been completely gone. Hey, isn't that your new constellation just north of Orion? Makeshift Stories is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB Financial. To listen to other great APN podcasts, such as The Undad or the Bothy Storytelling Podcast, please head over to albertapodcastnetwork.com. Starting or building a business? ATB's Entrepreneur Center is a great place to go. Of course, they can help you with your banking, but they also offer workshops and networking opportunities. They can also help you get set up with a mentor. To check this and other great cutting-edge services, please head over to atb.com. Makeshift Stories is released once a month between the 15th and the 20th. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Mitchell Tew. Opening and closing music was composed and recorded by David Hume. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. You can help us out by writing a review on Stitcher Radio or Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcast services. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivative license, which means that you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.